Hi everybody, I'm Jen. Welcome to today's video. If you hear strange noises in the background, Buddy, my little puppy dog, I don't know if you can see him. He's having a bit of a scratch. Hey bud. Isn't he cute? Video. So I'm Jen and I have a Bachelor of Psychology and I'm passionate about using brain science and psychology-based personal development tools to help women fill their own cup first in order to be better mothers, sisters, friends, partners, whatever it is that you're striving towards. I'm also the host of a free Facebook group called Highly Sensitive Extroverts with Jen T. So if you are an HSP or a highly sensitive person and you're an extrovert, then you are truly unique, just like me, because we make up only about 6% of the population. We have different struggles and different challenges, and that's why I created the Facebook group to help HSEs as well as women, as I mentioned earlier. And I also wanted to draw your attention to a free guide I created called Feel Fantastic in 3 Simple Steps. The link to that is in the post attached to this video. The link to join the group is also in the post attached to this video. So today's topic is all about healthy boundaries. So do you have healthy boundaries? So here's the situation, and I just want to see if you can relate. So have you ever been asked to do something by a boss, a family member or friend that you feel is unfair or unreasonable, and you feel a bit weird in your gut, or you just feel uncomfortable with the request? Chances are, if that's what's happening, then the request is actually crossing one of your boundaries, which may be subconscious for some of you. Now, the topic of boundaries is a really, really large area. So today I'm going to stick to a much more specific area, and that's dealing with unreasonable requests. Now, some people are notorious for making unreasonable requests of us. And if we say yes to these requests, then we're actually not helping the situation, but instead we're allowing this behaviour to continue. So while we can't change them and their ideas of what's reasonable and what's not, what we can do is we can protect ourselves by setting some helpful boundaries when dealing with this particular person or these types of people. So I'm going to give you some, I suppose, tips on how to work out whether an unreasonable request is being made. So if you often find yourself doing things that make you mad, make you upset or resentful, that is a pretty good sign that you have a lack of boundaries. If you always say yes to requests, or if you have difficulty saying no, that's another warning sign. If you find yourself highly stressed out or just worn out a lot of the time, then that could also mean a lack of healthy boundaries. So if you can relate to any of this, whether you're watching this live or whether you're watching the recording, then make a comment like "me unhealthy" or something like that, just to let me know that you can relate to these topics that I'm presenting. So in terms of having healthy boundaries or not, if healthy boundaries are missing in your life, the signs to look out for, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of stress, a lot of resentment, a lot of anger, burnout, financial burdens, the feeling of wasting time, relationship issues, or mental distress. All of those things can be a sign that the boundaries that we have are either not strong enough or perhaps we're lacking them altogether. And I'm going to give you an example from my life of what can happen if you agree to an unreasonable request from somebody else. So I once found myself in a situation where I was on my hands and knees, and I was crawling into very dirty kitchen cupboards and scrubbing them clean for a friend who was moving out of her rental. Now, to give you a bit more context on that, I did offer to help her move, but I was thinking along the lines of carrying boxes out of one place, putting them in a car or a truck, and then driving those to the new place and moving them out of the car and putting them into the new place. I was not thinking that this helping to move would include doing all the dirtiest work, and get this, while she packed boxes. So the situation might have been different, or my feelings about the situation might have been different if she was doing the dirty work with me, but I felt that the request moved into what we could calling an unreasonable request, because she was still going through all her belongings and sorting out, what should I keep, what should I chuck out, what can I donate to charity, what can I pack, and here's me on my hands and knees in these really grubby cupboards trying to scrub them out. So that's what I believe made it unreasonable. So if we find ourselves in these situations, what can we do instead? Well, obviously, that's a big sign that we need to set some healthy boundaries. So when we're on the topic of unreasonable requests, the first thing we need to do is, how do we determine if someone is making an unreasonable request? Now, unfortunately, there's no clear-cut, simple answer, but what I try and do is I look at it from two different perspectives. So the first one is, would I ask someone else to do what they're asking me to do? And the second one is, would most people think that this request is unreasonable? Now, if the answers to those questions are no, I would never ask somebody to do that for me, and yes, most people would think it's unreasonable, then consider it an unreasonable request. But also trust your gut instinct, because if it feels unreasonable or unfair, chances are it is. So there's a couple of ways to handle unreasonable requests. Now, this is where it gets uncomfortable and this is where it gets hard. So the first way is we need to get good at, first of all, recognizing an unreasonable request when it's thrown at us, and we need to get good at saying no. Now, the easiest way to say no is to simply say, no, I'm sorry, but I'm not comfortable with that. Stop there. Because no explanation is actually required. And I think that most of us, the reason we struggle with this is because we feel like we owe them an explanation for why we're saying no when we don't. And in fact, if you just leave it at that, just say, no, I'm sorry, but I'm not comfortable with that. If you just leave it there, most people, that will be the end of it and they won't push it because you've been very clear. But if you find yourself providing an explanation, what that actually does is that it opens the door for further conversation. So you are going to end up in a kind of to and fro with this person, and you're going to feel like you're having to justify your position. And that's not a nice place to be in, particularly when you don't need to justify it. The fact that you're uncomfortable with what they're asking you is a good enough reason to say no. So remember that. Say no, but only say no. Clearly, concisely, that's it. So I'm going to say the sentence again, I suppose, in case you want to write it down. But the easiest way to say no is simply to say, no, I'm sorry, I'm not comfortable with that. Full stop, no further comment. So no, I'm sorry, I'm not comfortable with that. Sounds simple, but it's sometimes easier said than done. Now, a harder option in this scenario, and this is, I think, particularly crucial when you're trying to deal with somebody who is perhaps a relatively big part of your life, and they are one of the people I mentioned before, that they're notorious for asking unreasonable things of you because their definition of unreasonable is very different to yours. Or in the case of the people that I know who do this, it's like nobody's ever educated them. Nobody's ever said no to them. So they just keep asking these things. So in that situation, I think option 2 is kind of even more important, but it's harder to do. So the harder option is to call the person out on it being unreasonable. So the reason I think this is so important is because you're kind of educating them in a subtle way of what's reasonable and what's not, but it's also probably the quickest way to stop more unreasonable requests coming from them in the future. So if you do want to go all in and confront them, then my advice is to be polite and just say something simple like, I feel X doing that when you are doing X. So for example, in the situation I was explaining before, when I was head stuck in the dirty kitchen cupboards, I could say something like, I find it a little unfair that we're all getting down and dirty while you're still sorting through stuff and packing. My understanding was that you needed help to move house, not do a vacate clean. Is there something else I can help you with? So that's one option. Another, I came up with a couple of different ways to say it, just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. Another thing you could say is, I would never ask you to help me do jobs like this, so I'm going to have to politely decline to scrub your kitchen cupboards or scrub dirty walls, but I'm more than happy to help you take boxes out to the car if you can point me in the direction of those boxes. The last idea I came up with is, my understanding was that you needed help to move house, not do a vacate clean. So perhaps I can come back when you're ready to move and I can help then. So give me a call when you're ready for that part. So as you can, I hope you can hear that these ones are a little bit more confronting. And if you think about saying that to somebody, it would be quite difficult. But I think it's a bit of that kind of short-term pain, long-term gain type situation, because if you do it that way, then they're less likely to ask you unreasonable things in the future. Now, another scenario I thought of, which is what happened to me, is if you get caught out and realize too late that it's an unreasonable request. So for example, you're halfway through doing the thing that they asked you to do. So for me, I was halfway through cleaning the kitchen cupboards. Then what's probably happening is you're getting more and more mad and more resentful about the whole situation. So that's a really big sign that what they've asked you is unreasonable. Now, in that situation, you have a choice. You could stop midway through what you're doing and give them a true excuse. So for example, I could have said, look, my knees are absolutely killing me. You know, I've got bad knees, so I'm going to have to stop now, but I've done half of it. Make sure it's the truth though. I'm not advocating that you just make up stuff to get out of doing the task. Or if you wanted to be a little bit more confronting, you could say, oh, this is a bit unfair. Look at what I'm doing compared to what you're doing. Or, and this is the option that I took, you can finish that particular job and then advise that you need to get back home. And that's what I did. So I kind of took the chicken option in that situation. But looking back now, I do wish that I had spoken up and I had kind of called the issue a little bit more, because I know that that would prevent future unreasonable requests. So I just wanted to reiterate that again, that even though it can be really confronting and talking about this can be very challenging, I would suggest that it is the best way to help stop unreasonable requests happening in the future. And if you do it politely, the other person really can't complain. And if they do complain, well, that just falls into the category of you can't control or change what other people think. You can only do what you think is right. And in this case, that's standing up for yourself, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. And the other thing about, I mentioned doing the hard option, which is confronting them and pretty much saying this is unreasonable. The other advantage of that is they're going to think twice before they ask things of you in the future, because you're educating them that you're not afraid to say no, and you're not afraid to say this is unreasonable. And saying no to unreasonable requests can be tough to start with, but it's a skill and it is possible to get better at it with practice. And much of that practice can be done in the safety of your own home so that you're more prepared when you're in these situations in the future. So I'm going to finish up with a challenge like I usually do. We've gone a bit longer this week than we normally do, but I think that's probably because it's a pretty tough topic, tough thing to deal with. So the challenge this week, if you choose to accept it, is to write a list of people who often make unreasonable requests of you and prepare some answers or responses that you can use with them next time. And number one on your list could be, no, I'm sorry, I don't feel comfortable with that, full stop. That's a really good one to practice. So it could be your boss, it could be your mother-in-law or your brother, whoever does it all the time. And then what I'll ask you to do is share in the group, highly sensitive extroverts, who is on your list. General terms are fine. I don't expect you to name and shame. And also what you commit to doing next time they make an unreasonable request of you. So we'll continue this conversation in the group. Please also share your thoughts, experiences and struggles around this topic, because it is a very tricky situation to find yourself in. As you heard from my example, I didn't actually handle it the best way possible last time it happened to me. Anyway, I look forward to hearing more. So lastly, don't forget to download your free guide, 3 Simple Steps to Feel Fantastic. And I'll see you in the group or next week right here, same time, same place. Thanks for watching. Ciao for now.